Hello and welcome, Matt from Gallantway here. Today's session we are running through the US market. Really excited to talk to you and share some of the insights, frequently asked questions and challenges that our team at Gallantway help founders through. We have a lot of experience in taking brands to the US market, so we've organized a bit of a presentation, a few insights and just overall numbers to help you on your journey. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. There's plenty of ways to get in touch, either through social channels, through email, or directly through the old-fashioned telephone. So today we're going to run through a couple of key segments. The first is frequently asked questions, so kind of questions that we see quite commonly all of the time, mostly around investment strategy, technology, shipping, fulfillment, a few insights that we have around various grants that you can get access to help you launch into the new market. And then also some just overall consumer insights, what the landscape's like, do's and don'ts, and at the end a checklist that you and your business or your marketing team can kind of run through. Maybe some top line numbers, so US market size, 330 million people. A significant proportion of those are obviously online and very reachable for through direct channels like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest, blah, blah, blah. In conjunction with that, it's also useful to kind of think of the states in market sizes as well. So if we take California alone, there's nearly 40 million people just within California. So compared to Australia, 25 million people here, you can essentially double your market size, even if you just went to California. And that's one thing that we work with our founders on quite a bit. Rather than try and tackle the whole pie, let's just start with either the East or West Coast, whatever's most relevant to your brand. There's lots of similarities between the West Coast in terms of demographic. It's close to a lot of fulfillment and shipping centers, so it's generally a pretty good place, or the East Coast as well, depending on obviously your brand and what you need. So key little insight there, think about California. There's 40 million people there. It's double the market size here in Australia. So it just opens up your door in your addressable market very easily, and you can do it in a much more bite-sized way. So let's maybe just a quick primer on us. So we're Australia's leading strategic e-commerce growth firm. We work with businesses, small and big, founder-led teams to help them grow and scale commerce and e-commerce brands. It's something that our team does every single day, whether it's running more profitable ad campaigns, improving performance on email, or maximizing the store value. That's essentially what we do. We do it every single day. There's some videos and some things there you can learn more about us, but we're here to talk about the US, so let's do that. So today, we're gonna run through a couple of key questions. Things like, how much do we spend? How do I know if it's successful? What is a successful launch? Where do we start targeting? Who do we target? What's our plan B? What if it doesn't work? How do we get out? How do we get in? What do we do with pricing? Do we need a Shopify Plus store? Can we clone our store? Where do we ship from? What are our shipping and fulfillment options? How do we deliver customer service? Are there any business grants or government support available here in Australia? And then kind of what's different about the US customer market. So we'll touch on each of these. Included in this video also are some links to the actual presentation itself, so you can have a read through and go through in a lot more detail. So let's kind of start with one of the big questions around how much should we spend. Let's agree that any goal of a new market is fundamentally to establish the business, increase your addressable market of potential customers, and serve as a baseline benchmark into a region with as little risk as possible. So an easy way to think about it is, how do we get into the market? How do we understand the metrics of the business? So what's our customer acquisition cost? How good are our returning customer rates? Are people kind of converting at the same rate that they are in our home market? And to do that with as little risk as possible. There's a balance here. You do need data to kind of make decisions, and you don't want to overinvest, but at the same time, you need to balance that with, the time and effort that it takes to get into the market. So the way that we recommend brands do that is, let's prioritize our target customers, let's prioritize our target products and best products, things that are already working well and that we have a really good understanding of. And let's think about our target regions. So those three things combined is going to give us our best overall probability of success into that market. So really knowing who our target customers are, what their attributes are, that's going to allow us to pick the right markets in the US rather than tackle the whole continental US. Best products, things that your business already does very well, sets you apart, is very clearly defined, and then also our target region. So those three things together will help a lot. Some other interesting stats. So if we're just kind of looking at taking across what works from a customer acquisition and marketing standpoint, most marketing platforms, things like Meta, TikTok, they have minimum requirements when it comes to data in order to make decisions. So Facebook is about 50 conversions a week in order to kind of get through the learning phase, get to a point where it has enough data to make some good decisions on. So that's one kind of variable. What we can do there is start to think about, okay, well, if our business needs 50 conversions a week, our current customer acquisition cost might be $80. If we're running 3 campaigns, it's going to need 150 conversions per week at a spend of about 12 grand a week. So we can do some basic math here and kind of back out our media spend and investment numbers. Obviously, stock's a completely different scenario. Customer service, there are other costs involved in obviously getting into a new market. But at a baseline, here's a good way of kind of thinking about it. How do we know if it's successful? A great question. So again, if we refer back to our original idea, any new market entry, our goal is to establish the metrics and do so profitably. From our standpoint and from our recommendations and what we've seen, the degree of profitability can be optimized. We know that, but if it's fundamentally unprofitable for the business, that's a test that's successful. And you know that that's not the right strategy, that's not the right market for your product, for your business, for your target customer. So, the goal, obviously, profitable growth, that's fundamental. If we can achieve that, that's great. Then you have the ability to obviously to optimize that over time very easily. But that's kind of our number one goal is let's get into the market, let's understand what the metrics are, let's make sure we're profitable, number one, then we can think about, adding more capital and growing. Where do we target and how do you figure out whether California or New York or another market like Texas or somewhere else within the US, Canada? There's, obviously North America is quite big. Where do you start? Where do you target? That's a tricky question. If you don't already have existing conversions, if you don't already have existing sales, you don't really have a substantial data set there, you've got two different options. The first one is look at Google Analytics, look for highly engaged traffic from the US market. So you can take your US location data, segment that by city or by state, and then get a pretty good idea about, okay, well, we know that the average time on site for a New York customer is twice that of a Los Angeles user, for example. That can start to give us and help us build a bit of picture around where do we target, where do we start. Alternatively, what we can do is also look at tools like the Google Trends, but also more importantly, the Google Keyword tool, which gives us volume, which we can segment by market size. So what we can do is say you're a beauty brand and you are selling a sun skin product. What you can do is look for like skincare, sun, beauty products as queries in the Google Keyword tool, and then segment those by market. And that's going to give us a pretty good idea around how many searches occur each month in various markets, how many searches occur each month in LA versus New York. And that's going to help us tell us kind of what the total potential is for those regions. It won't tell us whether those queries are relevant for your brand, but it will give us an idea of how big that market size is. Those are probably your only two options if you aren't already shipping to the US. The next part to think about here is what's our plan B? It's great to think everything goes right, everything goes smoothly. But for a moment, we really encourage the founders and marketing teams that we work with to put that negative hat on for a second and say, what could go wrong? Imagine the worst case scenarios and begin to map out those plans for if these scenarios eventuated. So that's something that we work with our clients on. What's our plan B? What do we change? Let's be prepared for it, even if it doesn't happen. It's easy to be wired naturally to have that entrepreneurial growth mindset, but for a moment, let's park that. Let's put our black hat on and say what happens, what goes wrong, and think from the opposite way forward. Pricing, another great question. So do you adjust pricing? Do you adjust for currency? Do you look at competitors in the local market and adjust? It's very nuanced, this question. At its purest level, if we refer back to our high level objective, let's get in the market, let's understand the metrics, and let's make sure we're profitable. Any pricing adjustment or parity changes to achieve competitor pricing parity or market parity need to be done with that idea of growth. Pricing should be set at a point where we can get customers in the door. We can understand the metrics of the business and we can do so profitably. Probably doesn't give you the exact numbers that you're looking for, but it gives you the idea of how we should be thinking about pricing. Obviously, if you're already in the market in the US, you've probably got, if you're shipping out of Australia and you've got customers doing that, then it's probably a little bit easier. But if you're completely new, that's a great way of thinking of it. Technology, shipping, and fulfillment. So this is really kind of one of the biggest challenges. Do we ship from Australia? Do we use Amazon? Do we find a 3PL? Which 3PL? Where do we find it? There's a whole rabbit hole, and there's a lot of challenges in this piece, and this is probably where a lot of our founders kind of spend a lot of time. So the first one is, should we launch a new store? Should we use Shopify Plus? Typically, if we find that brands are at this point, they've got a decent amount of revenue coming in the door through Australia or Australia and New Zealand, and for the cost of Shopify Plus versus maybe cloning stores and creating new stores, and the resource required to go and do that, it's oftentimes much easier to do that. Plus, you unlock some other capabilities through Shopify Plus. So that's generally our recommendation. Obviously, that differs a little bit. There's pros and cons, but generally, you want a customized store for the US market for a couple of different reasons, which we'll explain in a little moment. And evaluating Shopify Plus in this process does make a lot of sense, because you get access to some automation, you get custom checkout, which can be really useful if you've got retail stores or you're looking at a retail store and you want to do click and collect or something like that. And then you also get wholesale, which opens up the marketplace opportunity and a few other things when it comes to new channels. But yeah, give us a shout if you have any questions. We can run you through a bit of an evaluation process there. Shipping. So shipping and fulfillment. We've included a number of different options here, and the most popular US 3PL services have we've kind of mapped out the pros and cons of these. So we won't go through them all in detail, but you're probably already on the path here and you've probably already evaluated these to some degree. If you want to take away anything, it's really things like, we want our products close to where our consumers are. It sounds really obvious. Shipping is important, shipping time is important. If we're closer, if our distribution's close, if our warehouse is closer to where our customers are, we can get our products there faster. It's simple. It won't answer your specific questions in your specific scenarios, but we've included a number of different options here. We'd encourage you to kind of reach out and ask us any questions around them, and we'll be happy to connect you with the right people to kind of help you evaluate what's right for you and your business. Australian export grants. So we're lucky here in Australia. There is a program that's been started by Austrade called the Export Market Development Grant, or EMDG grant. It is an eligibility-based grant, so something that does need a kind of a bit of work, and it is demand-driven. So there are some conditions around it, and there are, I guess, like eligibility requirements to kind of work through based on the size of the business and costs and the scenarios or whatever. That being said, fully encourage you to look into it. We have clients, taking advantage of it. So if you have any questions, do let us know. Moving on from there, we've got some insights around the US customer. If you're kind of at this point, you probably already have a very good idea of kind of who your user customer is and kind of why the US makes a bit of sense, and you're kind of evaluating how you actually go and activate in that market. But that being said, we do want to kind of give you a couple of things to think about. As I said before, 330 million total addressable market, which is great. California alone, as just an example, was about 40 million, so more than double your market size here in Australia, or just a little bit more than double. Sorry, a little bit less. Australia's 25 million. And I guess some of the key differences here is that Amazon as a retailer is a massive player in the US, and I probably don't need to tell you that, but the data from last year basically shows that around 56% of all e-commerce sales were through Amazon. So that probably won't answer your question around, hey, do we need to be on Amazon or do we not need to be? That needs a specific conversation around what's right for you and your business, but you should be considering them as part of your strategy, whether that's to work with them or whether that's to kind of position yourself and your business in a way where you're competing against them. So that's kind of one thing to consider. The other, I guess, key insight here is that around 35% or more than 1/3 of all e-commerce orders and gross merchandise value are in 4 states. So there's only 4 states. You basically get 1/3 of the market. So California, Texas, New York, and Florida. That's 1/3 of the US market there. The other thing to kind of consider is pricing power for consumers. The average consumer in California spends 4.1% more than the average American. So there are some strategic reasons why we prefer these markets. There are also some additional insights here which you can kind of take a bit of a read through that we think are pretty interesting. Social commerce is obviously growing pretty aggressively. Mobile sales obviously growing very aggressively. Very much a mobile first, smartphone first market. Things that you are probably already aware of. And that the market does itself require a little bit of local language translation. So US spelling does differ. And if you're looking at different languages, Spanish is the second most spoken language there, with about 40 million Spanish speakers. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea. I know this has gone on for a little bit, but hopefully you've taken something from this actual presentation itself. I will include the presentation in this video so that you can work through it. And importantly, there's a checklist that you can kind of work through, which kind of breaks out all of these different elements. So we've got a strategy component where you've kind of stress tested your strategy before you even spend $1. Like, that's pretty important. You've looked at technology, enablement, fulfillment. You've thought about your customer and attributes, where they are, who they are, and how you're going to engage with them with the products that are already your existing strength. You've evaluated your brand. You're solving for the local language differences, and you've done that through ads, through email, through product packaging, and through that whole life cycle. And then you're making the most of kind of grants and finance. You're doing the little things like checking your T's and C's and legal components on your website, through to accessing the EMDG grant and a few other things. And you've modeled out some different scenarios with your accounting or bookkeeping or virtual CFO partners. So there is a fair bit in here, but it's also something that doesn't have to be a 6-month project. We've had both. We've had clients that are doing a significant amount of trade, and they've been really slow to kind of work through this list. And then we've had clients that in the space of about 60 days have gone from not trading in the US to doing a significant volume of trade in the US. So there's a couple of different journeys, but generally speaking, all of these items that we've kind of talked through here today are all part of that journey. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got a little bit out of it. And if you have any questions at all, reach out on our website, get in touch. This is kind of what we do every single day. So we'd love to help you, help your business, and help kind of, more Australian products get into new markets and help our founders be successful. Thanks. See ya.